Hi, I'm John Stevenson, and we're going to be talking about the Crusades in our continuing study of the history of the Church. To set the stage, we need to talk about the East-West Schism, the time when there was a division between the Church where Rome separated from Constantinople. And now there came not one, but there came to be two churches, the Roman Church in the West and the Eastern Church with its base at Constantinople. And this schism remained. It began in the year 1054, and it continues to this day. There continue to be two churches, the Roman Catholic Church and the Eastern Church, or we could call it the Eastern Orthodox Church nowadays. It was in this setting that in the year 1096, the Muslims invaded Anatolia, that area that we know as the Turkish Peninsula today, east of Constantinople, and this had been largely a Christianized area, but now the Muslims invaded and were conquering and taking those Christian lands. The Byzantine Emperor Alexis I appealed to Pope Urban II for mercenaries. Perhaps the Pope thought, my goodness, here's the Eastern King asking me for help. Now, the Byzantine Emperor was hoping for maybe 1,000 or 2,000 soldiers. He's going to get a lot more than he bargained for. And so he puts in an appeal, and Urban II preaches a sermon. It's a call to arms. Let's go in and rescue those Christian lands. He embellishes a little bit. He says, let's go in and recapture places like Bethlehem and Jerusalem and Nazareth, those holy places. And the church at large responds to that call in a way that was beyond anybody's imagination. So we have the Crusaders moving into the Middle East, and they capture and carve out for themselves. Now, initially, Alexis I is saying, whatever you capture should be part of my empire. Instead of giving it to him, they carve out their own kingdoms, and they not only capture Jerusalem, going from south to north, they form the kingdoms of Jerusalem, Tripoli, what we would call modern-day Lebanon, Antioch, what we would call modern-day Syria, and Edessa, that's even further north of Assyria in modern-day Turkey. And they make these four kingdoms Christian kingdoms. Now, the results of the Crusades, and this is going to take place over several hundreds of years. First of all, there's an integration of Arabic learning. There were aspects of Arabic thought that had far surpassed European thought. For example, the numbering system that we use. Instead of using Roman numerals or just writing out the letter or the words like ONE for 1 or TWO for 2, we have the Arabic numerals that we are used to using. Those squiggly lines to write the numbers 1, 2, 3, and so on. We got that from the Arabs and integrated other areas as well in our relations with them. There came to be a renewed emphasis on the classics, again thanks to the Crusades, as people from the West re-encountered some of those Greek classics from ages gone by. There was also a weakening of the Byzantine Empire. You would have thought the Crusades would have strengthened that empire, but as we just noted, the Crusaders did not give the lands back to the Byzantine Emperor. Indeed, at one point in the Fourth Crusade, the Crusaders come and conquer Constantinople. Now, eventually, the Byzantines get it back, but there's a great weakening of that empire. There's also the growing power of the Christian church, and I'm going to say especially the Christian church in the West, because after all, it had been the Pope's sermon that had sparked off the Crusades, and so this increases his power and his prestige. This form of Christianity was intolerant of other faiths. Now, I don't mean by that merely that they were saying Christianity is true and the other faiths are not true, but it was an intolerance that took the form of the sword. So that, for example, when the Crusaders captured Jerusalem, they killed every Muslim, they killed every Jew within the city. That kind of strong intolerance. There was an increased emphasis on indulgences. The idea that you could pay your way into heaven by doing some great work for God. Perhaps going on a crusade would earn you salvation. Or if you could not go on a crusade, maybe you could send your servant in your place, and that service would purchase your salvation. So this emphasis on indulgences became a more and more ingrained part of Roman Catholic theology. Now it's in that setting, and he's 100 years into the Crusade, so we don't want to say he's right at the beginning, that we have a wonderful, delightful contrast in the person of Francis of Assisi. Assisi is the name from which he comes, a city in Italy, and Francis had served as a soldier early on. He was taken prisoner and spent a year in captivity, but once he is released, he devotes himself to a life of poverty. Gives away all of his possessions. In fact, his father's still alive, so his father is the one who is the landowner and has given some money to Francis, and Francis gives it away. And when his father finds out that he's giving, his son is giving his not only inheritance but money away, he says, "What is this? I gave that money to you." And Francis says, "Whatever you give to me, I'm going to give to the poor." I suppose his father stopped giving him money after that. But he devotes himself to a life of poverty, and the church eventually recognized the order of Franciscans. They still refer to that order today, and they ordain Francis as not as a priest, but as a deacon. So he is permitted to serve in the church, but he will not be a priest, and his followers will not be priests either. Francis travels to Egypt on what he calls a pilgrimage of non-violence, and this is at a time when there are crusaders going to the Holy Land to fight the Muslims, and he comes to Egypt. He comes before the Sultan and he says, "I'm not here to fight with you, I'm here to tell you about the love of Jesus." And he meets with the Sultan. He is permitted to preach to the people. I don't know that he had that many converts, but he makes a very favorable impression upon the Sultan and upon the Muslims in Egypt. One of the quotes that is attributed to Francis, he says, "Let all brothers preach by their deeds." Now, he's not saying we shouldn't use words, but he's saying that our actions will speak louder than our words, and we ought to be aware of that.